Good morning. Today, the subcommittee will convene for open hearing to receive testimony from the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, Gen.Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mr. J. Hurst, performing the duties of Undersecretary of War Comptroller. Mr. Secretary, General Caine, and Mr. Hurst, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for your service to our great nation, and I thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today. I want to first acknowledge the extraordinary demands we place on all our volunteer force and the military families who bear the weight of service in human history. We owe everything to their sacrifice and send our thanks that they have answered the call to serve. This hearing addresses issues that are deeply interconnected and collectively define the national security challenge of our time. Let me begin with the budget. We want to be good partners with the department to ensure that our men and women in uniform have every resource they need. But I have serious concerns about how this bifurcated budget splits discretionary and mandatory funding and on some of our highest priority programs. We have significant gaps in needs for our warfighters that we had to address in the FY26 appropriations process because of the way mandatory was requested and enacted. This subcommittee needs to understand how the resources requested in this budget translates into real, measurable improvements in warfighting capability. We also need to understand the consequences of this funding approach. We owe that level of accountability to the American taxpayers. Next, on readiness. The picture demands our honest attention. Across the multiple domains, including munitions, shipbuilding, innovation, and aviation, questions persist about whether we are building the depth and reliance required for a high-end conflict. We have made progress in some areas. I want to acknowledge the department's efforts to address these questions. However, progress is not the same as capability in delivering, and capability delivery is what we need at this moment demands. Finally, that brings me to the threat environment we currently face. The world has grown more dangerous, more complex, and more interconnected in its risks. China is modernizing its military at a pace and scale that is alarming. Russia continues to wage a brutal war of aggression, and while Iran and their proxies have been dealt a severe blow, they remain a threat. Threats to Taiwan, Ukraine, NATO, Israel, our partners in the Gulf, and our allies across the globe are not abstract concerns. They are tests of America's credibility and resolve. This subcommittee believes deeply in the power of deterrence, but deterrence must be credible and credibility must be funded. Finally, Mr. Secretary, both you and your deputy must be commended for your commitment to reforming, modernizing, and prioritizing innovation at the department. I've been here a long time. I've watched administrations come and go, and I promise you that there are bureaucrats who are trying to wait you out. You must demand accountability at every level of your organization to ensure that the change you have demanded is taking place. Your call to move more quickly, inject competition, allow new entrants to participate requires rigorous and persistent oversight. Otherwise, the forces in the Pentagon will simply snap back to the status quo, which does not serve our warfighters or the United States taxpayer. Again, thank you for being here. The members of this subcommittee take our oversight responsibilities seriously, and we believe the American people deserve straight answers on these consequential questions. I look forward to an honest conversation on how we are matching resources to priorities and honoring our commitments to meet the moment. Now I recognize the distinguished ranking member, Mrs. McCollum, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your courtesy of extending this, and thank you for your statement. We have a lot to discuss. Historical high budget request, the cost of the war in Iran. Mr. Secretary, I appreciate this year that you opened up a dialogue with Chairman Calvert, myself, and with our authorizing Senate colleagues. When we last met, we asked for information to help us determine what the department needs to ensure our national security. We are still waiting for the information. We've asked several times for a complete update on munition levels, and it has not been provided. This lacking of delivery timely information for the committee is appearing to become a pattern. We've requested briefings on the status of the funds appropriated for Ukraine. That took 6 months for us to be adequately briefed. The reconciliation bill, which was enacted on July 4th of last year, we still need the details of how the funds were allocated and that were not provided to us until a 10-month wait. 10 months we waited for that. Details have been provided on Golden Dome, but only $185 billion of the program, and that's the initial research and development. We still have no idea what the costs are following on for procurement or maintenance of the program. The department must do a better job of sharing the information with us. With respect to the war in Iran, Mr. Secretary, I saw your comments in the Armed Services Committee. It was disappointing that you referred to members of both parties as defeatists. I know you won't bring personalities into this at this hearing, and I will not questionize your patriotism, nor will you question mine. But the cost of this war continues to rise as forces remain in the region. The Appropriations Committee has a fiduciary responsibility to the American people, so we will ask serious questions that need to be answered, and that's our constitutional duty. Chairman Calvert and I have asked for a breakout of funding needs for Operation Epic Fury. We need to know the impact of what it's having on the services executing missions beyond the war. The department notified us that the standard fuel price for the services has increased from $154 to $195 a barrel. That's more we have to pay for fuel, then there's less money available for training and exercise that the services need to perform. And the department does not have enough general transport authority to cover these activities without a supplemental. We must understand the department, what it will do if a supplemental is not sent to the Hill or enacted. Now for the 2027 request. The baseline budget of the Department of Defense requests over $200 million over last year's enacted level. When combined with the mandatory funding for defense requests throughout reconciliation, that's an increase of $400 billion, and that includes military construction. Together, that's nearly 44% increase in defense spending over last year. And the President proposes a domestic investment cut of $75 billion, or 10%. These cuts will have an impact on our national security in many ways, particularly cuts to education. The primary concern of the defense budget is that the administration split between discretionary funding and the appropriations control, mandatory funding that we do not control. Mr. Secretary, the administration is taking an enormous risk by asking for $350 billion in priorities through reconciliation. As we told you in our last meeting, reconciliation is not the best way to fund the department. Last year, reconciliation created broken glass, funding holes for vital programs that the appropriators had to fix, and that's why we need the information in a timely fashion. Most of your mandatory funding requests are for what you call presidential priorities, Golden Dome, drone dominance, munitions, the defense industrial base. What the administration submitted to us for these programs was a 28-page document, and that's not enough to properly explain $350 billion in funding. These programs will not be completed in one fiscal year, and they will have tails. That will put our department and our committee in a very difficult situation next Congress. Finally, as the chair did, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our service members, active duty, National Guard, and reserve components. They serve with honor and distinction, and I want to especially acknowledge those who have served in harm's way, including those who have fallen and who have been injured in Operation Epic Fury. Their families need to know that we will never forget them and that they have our enduring gratitude and support. Gentlemen, I look forward to your testimony. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. McCollum. Before we hear from our witness, I'd like to recognize the distinguished chairman of the full committee, my good friend, Chairman Tom Cole, for any opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, my good friend, Ranking Member Rosa DeLore, and all the members here. And welcome, Mr. Secretary and General Cain to the committee, and we appreciate all of you. And certainly you as well, Under Secretary Hurst. I didn't mean to leave you out there. I joined Chairman Calvert and members of the subcommittee by saying at the outset of this hearing that the men and women of our armed forces are the finest in the world. They deserve our full support and our commitment to giving them the resources they need that will keep them ready for the fights of today and tomorrow. Without hesitation, I recognize that a strong, agile, and effectively funded defense is not a mere priority, it is a necessity. The current threat environment facing the United States is as serious and as layered as anything I have witnessed during my time in Congress. The convergence of challenges from China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran demands that we all work together with a level of seriousness and urgency that frankly has not always characterized our defense debates in recent years. On the budget, I firmly believe that adequate and stable defense funding is a national imperative, and yet funding alone is not enough. Every dollar must reflect clear priorities, operational effectiveness, and strategic urgency. This subcommittee has a responsibility to ask hard questions about priorities, program performances, and whether the department's acquisition processes are keeping pace with the speed at which our adversaries are moving. To that end, I certainly associate myself with Chairman Calvert's concerns about a bifurcated funding of the Department of Defense. We have questions on the assumption of mandatory funding in the department's request. We need you to be a partner with us on this front. Transparency and communication are critical to ensuring that we are aligned as closely as we can be with your needs. And frankly, I do worry in the future, and I hope you address this in your remarks. This is the second reconciliation package for defense, and that creates cliffs for this committee in the future. At some point, that funding disappears, and we would have a massive increase in discretionary funding to sustain it. So how we do that going forward, when we do that, is a major concern for this committee, certainly for me personally. I also want to speak directly about the issue of our allies and partners. American power is most effective when it's exercised in concert with like-minded nations who share our interests and our values. As we look back on 250 years of our exceptional history, the truth of that statement is apparent over and over. From those who stood by us in our fight for independence to the shared mission against evil during World War II, tyranny falls when free nations stand together. America first has never meant America alone. American strength is not diminished when allies shoulder their share. It's multiplied, and we must continue to sharpen our strategic advantages. And I commend you for working to make sure that our partners are beginning to step forward. NATO remains a critical pillar of collective defense, while our alliances across the Indo-Pacific are indispensable to building a credible deterrent against rising aggression in that region. I'm interested today in hearing how this budget strengthens those partnerships and how the department's working to ensure that our allies are investing at levels commensurate with the threats that they, as well as we, face together. The bottom line is simple. We always hope for peace while maintaining the strength to defend it. We're committed to ensuring our military remains unmatched, our adversaries deterred, and the American people protected. Secretary Hegseth and General Cain, we look forward to your candid dialogue. The American people are counting on us to get this right, and I look forward to being a partner with you in that effort. Again, I thank you for being here today, and I thank you all for your distinguished service to our country. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to turn now to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Lauro, for any opening comments.
Thank you very much, Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member McCollum, and good to be with you, Chairman Cole and Secretary Hegseth and General Cain and Undersecretary Hurst. Welcome to the committee. The President is requesting $1.5 trillion in defense funding for the coming fiscal year. $1.5 trillion is an extraordinary sum of money. Congress and the American people have concerns about what you plan to do with this money. In fact, we have concerns about what you are doing with the more than $1 trillion you already have from last year's appropriations and reconciliations bills. How much will the President's, quote, skirmish in CENTCOM cost? I know at a recent hearing, $25 billion was cited, but we don't know what that includes or for what time period. This was only supposed to last 6 weeks. We have thus far been unable to get any reliable information as to the true cost of this war. The current ceasefire is tenuous at best, with attacks on Gulf nations happening just over the weekend. The President tweeted he will not support the latest communication from Iran, which we might agree with if we knew what was in it. but there has been a consistent lack of transparency since this war began. Media reports suggest there is intelligence that indicates Iran can survive for months at the current standoff, which means the cost of deployment of 50,000 service personnel with their equipment will only increase, as every additional day this war goes on brings with it additional costs. This administration has not presented Congress with any kind of clear or coherent strategy. Week to week, day to day, hour to hour, the rationale shifts, the objectives change. The end game is ill-defined when it is defined at all. If the administration intends to ask Congress for supplemental funding for the Iran war, then you need to come back to Congress and testify on that request specifically so that we and the American people can fully understand what this administration has gotten us into and how it plans to get us out of it. The question must be answered at the end of this crisis. What have we accomplished and at what cost? And before you come to the Congress for additional emergency funding, we need information. Has the department or any of the services utilized mandatory funding for operational activities in CENTCOM? If so, how much and from what accounts? If you can provide us with that breakout, it would be enormously helpful. And again, what is the department's estimate of the full cost of the operation against Iran to date? The $1 trillion allocated for fiscal year 2026, $1.5 trillion requested for fiscal year 2027, and possibly $25 billion for an upcoming supplemental, all as the total debt in the United States has reached 100% of gross domestic product. In other words, the national debt is now larger than the U.S. economy and about twice the historic average, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. The defense budget includes requested funding for the expanded Golden Dome for America at $185 billion, though those budget numbers are tenuous. A new Golden Fleet, in which 3 ships are estimated to cost $43 billion, and billions for private equity ventures, which do not have well-defined processes or sufficient transparency. With gas prices and inflation numbers increasing, the American people just want to afford the basic necessities for everyday life. But this administration is not doing anything to help them with the cost of living crisis. In fact, the administration is making the problem worse by proposing dramatic cuts across the board to domestic programs that support American families. We have the most powerful military in the history of humankind. I am extraordinarily grateful, as my other colleagues have pointed out, to the men and women of our armed services who sacrifice everything to keep us safe. Their devotion to duty is exemplary, and it must be matched by the seriousness and the sobriety of those at the very top of the chain of command. And right now, I worry if that standard is being met. I look forward to your testimonies today and hearing the answers to this committee's questions shortly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. We'll now begin witness testimony. Gentlemen, without objection, your full written testimony will be placed in the record. Secretary Hegseth, we begin with you for a brief summary of your remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's historic $1.5 trillion fiscal year 2027 budget for the Department of War. The President's budget request reflects the urgency of the moment, as was mentioned by many, addressing both the deferment of longstanding problems as well as positioning our forces for the current and future fight. I'm honored to appear alongside Gen.Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Jay Hurst, our Chief Financial Officer. And I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your partnership in securing the investments needed for a stronger and more secure America. A nation's ability to build, to innovate, and to support the critical needs of its warfighters at speed and at scale is the foundation upon which its survival rests. However, upon taking office on January 20th of 2025, President Trump inherited a defense industrial base that had been hollowed out by years of America Last policies, resulting in a diminished capability and capacity to project strength. Offshoring, outsourcing, cost overruns, degraded capabilities. Under the leadership of President Trump, our builder-in-chief, we are reversing this systemic decay and putting our defense industrial base back on a wartime footing. Urgency informs everything we do at this department. We are rebuilding a military that the American people can be proud of, one that instills nothing less than the unrelenting fear in our adversaries and confidence in our allies. We fight to win in every scenario. The $1.5 trillion budget request put forward by the president will build upon the historic $1 trillion FY26 top line and will continue to reverse the 4 years of underinvestment and mismanagement of the Biden administration. The $1.5 trillion budget will ensure the United States continues to maintain the world's most powerful and capable military as we grapple with a complex threat environment across multiple theaters. Not to mention, the budget also includes a historic troop pay increase, building on the pay increases this committee has given, and the budget eliminates all poor or failing barracks. Quality of life for our troops is front and center in this budget. By supercharging our industrial capacity and transforming how the department does business, we are restoring American commercial dominance at a pace unseen in generations, transforming the defense industrial base from the broken, slow-moving systems of the past. We have flipped the Pentagon acquisition process from a bureaucratic model to a business model, decisively moving from an acquisition environment paralyzed by bureaucratic red tape into an outcomes-driven organization focused on delivering the most for taxpayer dollars. And Mr. Chairman, you're right, it's a war of attrition against the Pentagon bureaucracy every single day, and we intend to win it. Over the past year, through historic multi-year procurement agreements, smart business deals, we have sent ambiguous demand signals to our industry partners to build more and build faster. The result has been a surge, a revitalization of our great American factories and massive reinvestment in the skilled American workers who serve as the industrial muscle behind our warriors. Let me briefly provide you with some concrete high-level metrics of what we've accomplished over the last few months. These are announced new facilities and investments to support American warfighters. The department has helped stimulate more than 250 private investment deals in 39 states, in 180 cities, in 150 different companies, worth more than $50 billion. This has resulted in 280 new and expanded facilities, more than 18 million new square feet of American manufacturing, and more than 70,000 new American jobs. These $50 billion in defense investments in new plants, assembly lines, and factories are private investments, not taxpayer dollars. By completely transforming our department's business model, American companies are investing in America with their own capital, a historic demonstration of American manufacturing and defense revitalization, all with their money, not Uncle Sam's. This has never been done before and is long overdue from a bureaucratic model to a business model. These investments equal great things for America, American families, and American workers, and help us ensure our warfighters can defend this great country. Together with the help of the policy updates and appropriations passed by Congress, President Trump's War Department has begun to turn the lights back on in manufacturing towns across this country to forge a lethal arsenal of freedom. Where our critical supply chains are threatened, the Department of War has acted decisively to inject capital, stimulate production, and prevent adversarial exploitation. We are firing up the American economic engine at every level of the defense industrial base. Every policy we pursue, every budgetary item we request serves to ensure that this department remains laser-focused on increasing lethality and survivability of our fighting force from the front lines to the factory floors. This is admittedly a historic budget. It is a fiscally responsible budget, and it is a warfighting budget. Under President Trump, we are restoring the unbreakable might of American manufacturing that we will need for generations. We are providing for our warfighters, and we are putting the people and interests of this country first. May Almighty God continue to watch over all of our troops, and may we honor the legacy of those brave Americans that we've lost. That is our sacred mission that we will continue to execute on. Thank you again to this committee for your partnership, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Cain, you're now recognized for your remarks.
Chairman Calvert, Ranking Member McCollum, Chairman Cole, Ranking Member DeLauro, thank you for having me, and to all the members of the committee, thank you for having me. I'm honored here today to testify alongside the Honorable Pete Hegseth and the Honorable Jay Hurst on the President's fiscal year 2027 budget. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak about the foundations of America's strength, the 2.8 million members of our joint force. I am continually inspired by the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, Coast Guardsmen, and civilians standing the watch for our nation, supported each and every day by their families. They could have chosen anything in their path of service, but they chose to serve our great country and meet our nation's challenges with courage, tenacity, and grit that's keeping our nation strong and safe. I would also like to express my deep gratitude for the 40 members of the Joint Force who we've lost in operations, combat, and training during my time as chairman, including 14 who passed during Operation Epic Fury, and our most recent loss, First Lieutenant Key, who valiantly gave his life trying to save a teammate while deployed on a temporary duty assignment in Africa, and we continue to hold hope for his teammate. The Secretary and I are deeply grateful for each of them and their families, and their names will never be forgotten. As chairman, my duty is to ensure our civilian leadership has a comprehensive range of options, military options, alongside the associated risks to make the nation's hardest and most complex decisions. I owe the President, the Secretary, and the Congress the truth at every turn, and my blueprint for this approach has always been General George C. Marshall. His firm commitment to civilian control and a nonpartisan military remains my constant standard, and I strive to follow his example by working with each of you and providing clear and candid nonpartisan military advice, and to present this committee with the clearest possible assessment of operational risk and readiness and executability within the unclassified environment that we find ourselves in today. As the chairman said, we're operating in a delicate and dangerous time. Global risk is scaling, and the complexities of the modern battlefield demand America's constant adaptation and innovation. America's joint force is operational at its core, purpose-built for the realities of a complex world. We're organized, trained, and equipped to execute the most demanding missions across the globe with unrivaled precision. And over the last year, our warfighters have consistently demonstrated exactly what it means to be the most capable, adaptable, and professional military on earth. We are able to accomplish this highly complicated work because we draw from a deep, enduring reservoir of training, professionalism, and commitment. Our ops tempo is high, but we're designed to sustain it, rebuilding our strength continuously. We rebuild readiness every day. We train every day. We learn and sharpen our edge every day. And driving this pace of change and maintaining our superiority requires timely, predictable, and sustained investment and a partnership with this committee and the broader Congress, and I appreciate that. And the resources that we'll discuss today are critical to modernizing the joint force and ensuring that if whatever threats emerge or when called upon, our nation can win. The President's budget supports the Department's goals of recharging the defense industrial base and the national industrial base while enhancing our military readiness. We will continue to ensure our warfighters are properly armed, globally integrated, and ready, while always taking care of our most precious thing, and that is our people. And while advancing the hardware and technology essential to fight, it's the character and competence of our people, particularly the 1.8 million members of our enlisted force, who make us proud every day. And they're represented today by the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, United States Navy SEAL Dave Isom, sitting behind me. While we face dynamic and dangerous times, I have absolute trust and confidence in our people who every day execute the most challenging missions with quiet professionalism. And coupled with the American spirit to outthink, outcompete, and relentlessly innovate, we will maintain our decisive edge, but doing so requires your continued partnership. It is also graduation season, where we welcome a whole bunch of new members to the Joint Force, to include members like Second Lieutenant Archie Dennis, United States Army, who along with his Citadel classmates in South Carolina joined the Joint Force this weekend. And I welcome he and all the other new graduates to the Joint Force. As I close, I humbly ask that we remember right now our deployed teammates out there doing our nation's work, going out into the darkness to do the things that we ask them to do. And I ask, as always, that we remember not just the 40 fallen that I mentioned earlier, but all of our nation's fallen and their families who soldier on. Thank you, and I also look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I want to ensure each member has a chance to ask questions, so everyone will have 5 minutes for their remarks. I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Secretary Hegseth, for decades, Congress and the department have sought acquisition reform and innovative technologies. It's only since FY24 that the level of investment started to catch up with the rhetoric. The FY27 budget request includes over $950 million for the Defense Innovation Unit, $54.6 billion for the Defense Autonomous Warfare Group, $580 million for the Joint Interagency Task Force 401, and for the counter small UAS. And I believe these investments will deliver overdue capability. And this subcommittee will continue to work with you to ensure success. I also note there's only $100 million for the accelerate the procurement and fielding of innovative technologies. That's surprisingly low given APFIT's success. The subcommittee will continue to support APFIT as we have in the past. I invite you to join me at the APFIT Day on the Hill, July 21st, to see firsthand how APFIT is delivering capabilities to the warfighter. Consistent with the desire for injecting innovation at scale, for decades there's been increasing demand for increasing resilience in the industrial base, and more specifically, the supply chain. The FY27 budget request includes over $20.2 billion for the Office of Strategic Capital and $30.4 billion for the Defense Production Act. As you're aware, we're working closely with the industrial-based policy team on the Civil Reserve Manufacturing Network to ensure the department can qualify and certify second and alternate sources to maximize American manufacturing. With exception of DIU and the Joint Interagency Task Force 401, most of the investments listed are in mandatory funding. What was the strategy to heavily rely on the mandatory funding sector in this budget?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. And I would, first, I would thank you and this committee for your efforts on acquisition reform, many of which had not been embraced by the department before, and a lot of templates on the table that were there for us to fall in and run fast with. And so speed, scale, cutting red tape, reducing requirements where we can, looking at things like DIU, Replicator, now the DOG, the Defense Autonomous Warfare Group. All of those were born of collaboration with the committee and efforts of now reformers we have in the department who are ready to run with it. As it pertains to the budget, I think there's a reality in this town of what can get done and how it gets done. And in a perfect world, everything would get done in regular order and with a $1.5 trillion top line, but there are a lot of challenges and dynamics, some of which I don't control. And ultimately, we look forward to working with the committee to ensuring, however it shakes out, that it's with full transparency with you and maximizing options for the department. And I think the reconciliation last year was a new vehicle, so it took some time, especially because we're doing new things, Office of Strategic Capital, different avenues. So figuring out how to deploy that took longer than we'd like, but we're committed to ensuring this year, with that as a vehicle, a part of it, that we do it in concert with you to ensure the most important things, whether they're in that or in regular order, are included in the budget.
understand the desire for flexibility. I understand why we're breaking this up in order to, into chunks, to, I guess, more digestible to some degree politically. But I would hope we can get a supplemental bill here soon. Obviously, that we know that of the munitions issue, and we know of the cost of this conflict, and we know the cost of other conflicts. And so we need to repay those O&M accounts that are going to be used, I suspect, in order to pay for this ongoing operation. So any idea when we're going to get this supplemental?
We're well aware of all those dynamics. I think, first of all, the munitions issue has been foolishly and unhelpfully overstated. We know exactly what we have. We have plenty of what we need. And the reason we're accelerating a lot of this is because the department's been static in how it does this kind of business, not to mention the amount that was given to Ukraine for years and years. So we are getting after changing that dynamic so that we're not getting 100 more of something, but the companies are investing so there's new plants, so you're getting 2x, 3x, 4x of those munition in future years, because that's what we need, that's what our allies and partners through FMS require, and we just haven't been delivering it. So we're in good shape on that front. Whatever we think we need, we will submit. But I'll say, even in the conduct of the conflict, working with the chairman and Admiral Cooper, ensuring that any munitions we're using, we know what we're trading off of to preserve capabilities, so we have maximum optionality across the globe, which we do.
Again, no, it would be helpful to get the supplemental sooner rather than later, for we can get to work on it. And now recognize Ms. McCollum for her question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, the House Armed Services Oversight Hearing, Mr. Hurst stated that the costs for the war for Operation Epic Fury are at $25 billion. Am I correct with that number that you used at the hearing, Mr. Hurst?
Yes, ma'am, that was the cost at that time.
At that time. I would request that you provide the committee in writing the specifics of what the department will be requesting in the supplemental and the breakouts for the following costs. We talked munitions, and Mr. Secretary, I think we'd have a more robust discussion on that if we were in a classified setting, but I respect what you shared with us. But this is what I'd like. A breakout for military personnel, operational activities, additional maintenance for deployed ships, munitions used, equipment lost, and updated fuel costs. Now, we need to know the funding required to cover the damage to the U.S. facilities, and if there are any agreements from our regional allies, we hear things in the press, that would be helping for any new facilities or improvements in CENTCOM. Now, Mr. Hurst, here's the rub. We need that by June 11th. We mark up our bill. And some of these are not new asks, but I thought I'd drill down and be just a little more specific for you. So I know you're going to do your best. We'll take the homework assignment in pieces. Anything you can provide would be great. Now, under the War Powers Resolution, the administration has 60 days to conclude activities unless Congress has declared war or provided authorization. Congress has not done that. And I know there's different opinions and it changes from day to day whether or not the war powers clock is paused. But this law states beyond May 2nd, the administration needs congressional authorization to continue military operations. And the president just recently said yesterday that Epic Fury is not over. Military operations have continued. We have a naval blockade, and both sides are exchanging fire. And they did so over the weekend. Speaker Johnson, in my opinion, should put an authorization on the floor this week. But Mr. Secretary, if Congress does not authorize, if we don't authorize this, to continue military operations against Iran, you're going to have a plan put in place to draw down our troops, to reset the region, to protect our assets. I'm wondering, and that might be in a classified situation, but could you provide this committee with Plan B? Because if we go there, we're going to have to reset our budget after June 11th if the War Powers Act, in my opinion, should be invoked and it comes to Congress. But we don't know what the outcome would be. Do you have a Plan B?
Ranking member, I would say we have a plan for all of that. We have a plan to escalate if necessary. We have a plan to retrograde if necessary. We have a plan to shift assets. Certainly in this setting, we wouldn't reveal what the next step may be, considering the gravity of the mission that the president is undertaking to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear bomb.
Well, Mr. Secretary, as you know, we can be in receipt of that in a different situation, and we would also like that by June 11th. With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, as I said in my opening remarks, I have concerns about the use of reconciliation. I don't have any concerns about the amounts and the effort to restore the industrial base. You're to be commended for that. And frankly, I think we've underinvested for a long time. So I'm happy to see a robust number. I am worried about the ability to sustain that number through the reconciliation process. At some point, that money disappears. And we'll be, so give me some sense of how much of this reconciliation money is one-time expense that you expect to either use for procurement that you may not need to do again for a long time or inject in the industrial base. How much is for day-to-day operations that we would need, frankly, to think of as a long-term recurring expense?
It's a good question, Mr. Chairman, and I'll defer to Jay on details, but I would say take, for example, the deals that are being cut that will be funded here, that ultimately look at companies that make exquisite weapon systems for us. And they say, in exchange for a 5 to 7 year contract, which committees like this have authorized for us, the authorizing committees, not the appropriating committees, the authorizing committees. And now, because they have that clear demand signal, they're able to invest in a new plant and they're paying for it. And that's what I talked about in my open remarks. So they're building 2 or 3 new facilities, but we're committed to paying for those munitions for 5 to 7 years from this budget. And ultimately, but the nice part is we're saving money because there's no inflation. It's at the cost of it today, even when we buy it 7 years from now. And that's why you're seeing a $331 billion in munitions as part of this budget. There's a rocket fuel component to this, given the underinvestment that exists inside this budget. There will be some tail, obviously, and as I acknowledged up front, a higher top line from this department's perspective is always a welcome thing. But the intention is not to get anyone stuck in a certain place, but to address the needs of the moment, cut different deals, create new dynamics where companies actually invest. So we have, this committee knows the exquisite munitions that we're going to be using 5 to 7 years from now, no matter what. It's about time we look into the future the way we are with this budget, but you have to fund that. And so I think that's a big chunk of an increase that you see. I mean, if you're investing in the shipbuilding industrial base, the defense industrial base, housing and barracks, all of that increase troop pay. We're looking at increasing the top line of the entire force by 50,000 troops. That's an investment into the future. So I would acknowledge that a lot of this does have follow-on cost, but some of it is something we're going to pay for now and benefit from in the future. But Jay, I would defer to you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in this, there's $113 billion for investments in the defense industrial base. I would characterize that as a one-time plus-up for catch-up. $35 billion for FSRM to fix all of our poor and failing barracks and other facilities of the department, and also some catch-up investments in AI and autonomy. And so if you look at what we're doing with mandatory, probably about $200 billion of that is a one-time expense. We come down to 1.23 for a requested top line for FY28. And so we think we can sustain these investments over the FIDAP with the discretionary dollars after this.
Well, that's reassuring. And again, I don't have any disagreement with what you're trying to accomplish at all. I would remind you that, frankly, the use of reconciliation depends on political support in Congress that can be very transitory. So it's a high-risk strategy as opposed to building things into the baseline. But again, I'm supportive of what you're trying to do in terms of recharging the industrial base. I think it's long overdue. Let me ask you a specific question, and you may want to get back to me on this, I don't know, but we've had some discussion over, we lost one E3 on the ground. Thank goodness. It looks like no crew loss. This committee's been interested in investing in the E7. The Pentagon signed a contract for 5 additional planes, not in the Air Force budget. Is there going to be a fix to that, or where are we at on thinking about the E7?
I'm well aware of that dynamic. I know our department had taken the position that it was airborne or other satellite ISR that was probably going to be capable of a lot of that in the future. But I think that mindset was indicative of a mindset that we've shed, which is the divest to invest mindset, which was an austerity mindset that we're going to get in continuing resolution after continued resolution. So we got to get rid of these platforms in order to invest in these platforms. And there are gaps that need to still be filled. And there are systems that still need to be funded that are used on the battlefield right now, say MQ-9s, A-10s, you name it. I think this and the E-7 is one of those. So we've actually sent a budget amendment to OMB to add that. I think it has a future. It has a place on the battlefield, and we'll get more information for you on that as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I particularly, though, appreciate the mindset. I think you're 100% right. I've seen this over and over again about eliminating platforms on the idea we would immediately use that money for new things, and quite often it just simply didn't happen. We lost the capability, but we did not move forward with the investment that we needed. So, again, thank you for rethinking that. We've got a lot more questions, but so does the entire committee, Mr. Chairman. So with that, I'll yield back.
I just want to make one quick comment when you're talking about the fixing barracks and facilities. I hope we also fix the property management systems throughout the department, which is woefully needs attention. With that, I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lauro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the national security strategy says American national power depends on a strong industrial sector capable of meeting both peacetime and wartime production demands. And the national defense strategy directs DOD to, quote, supercharge the defense industrial base. DOD's 2027 budget overview appears to use that same framing. Yet, your department's budget request cuts over $5 billion from the industrial base in the aviation sector alone, effectively shutting down all current Army aviation platforms. These are current production platforms the force relies on for lift, for sustainability, disaster response, homeland missions, et cetera. How did the department arrive at the conclusion that reducing procurement for these Army aviation platforms strengthens rather than weakens the aviation industrial base?
Well, I very much appreciate that question, and I actually think it's something we're taking another look at. I think it's not that every aspect of there are some very good things in the Army Transformation Initiative, and there are some things that we've needed to get another look at. Mm-hmm. And so I think you'll see a review of some of those things, and we'll get back to you on that.
Of the aviation sector?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with that, but was there an analysis about the impact of the requested procurement reduction? Did you all do an analysis of production line suppliers, workforce, restart risk prior to the decision to cut the funds?
We'll get that from the Army and get that to you. I don't have it in front of me, but I would imagine something was done.
Very, very much would love to see that before the subcommittee marks up the appropriations bill coming up. Let me just quickly, can you provide the committee in writing the department's assessment of the minimum sustaining production rate for the Black Hawk and Chinook industrial base, the supplier-based risks associated with this budget request, and the funded mitigation plan if production falls below those levels? Can you provide us with that information? I think that's critically important.
I think we should get that to you, and I think those platforms are critical to the force right now, and we need to make sure we're able to sustain them.
Yeah, I think you made the point, you all, that industrial-based readiness is a strategic issue. It's what the national security strategy recognizes, and I look forward to hearing more about how cutting the $1 billion in the base investment aligns with that shared goal. Let me just, a question to you, General Caine. Despite the precipitous drop in procurement for Army aviation platforms, your budget request invests heavily in modernization. I'm a believer in modernization. I think that's necessary. I support investing in future capability, but Congress also has to understand the transition risk. The department is asking us to accept reduced procurement of aircraft the force uses today while relying on future systems that are not yet fielded. And General, from a joint force readiness perspective, what is the department's plan to avoid a mobility lift sustainment gap if current aviation capacity declines faster than replacement capability arrives? What are the decision points where the department would revisit the reductions if future vertical lifts schedules slip, if costs rise, or operational demand remains higher than expected?
Well, Ranking Member, I appreciate the question. And any time we're looking at military options to our political leaders, we do bake in and can carefully consider that transitional risk because it links back to risk to force, our military forces, and risk to missions. And as we look forward over the life cycle of this budget and beyond into the FYDP, we're always looking at the evolution of those operational plans and then the decision points along the way to make sure that we can match the combat capability and capacity required to achieve the desired effects that are baked within those operational plans across the COCOMs. And I commend the Army, who's looking closely at the two platforms that you're most interested through your line of questioning, and the work that Undersecretary Obadal has been doing to look at rotary wing lift requirements as we move to the future. But in the end, we have to have mobility on the battlefield. It has to be survivable in the conflicts and engagements it will have, and so we remain very closely focused on those requirements.
Well, I appreciate that, and my only concern is not whether modernization is important, but I understand with some of those efforts that we are looking for a future date is next year, the year after, so forth, because it's not been fielded. But what we need to take a look at, and I think you understand this, is whether the department is managing this transition in a responsible way. In my view, what we cannot afford to do is to create a near-term aviation gap. We weaken the supplier base and then ask the Congress to come back and rebuild that capability and that capacity at a greater cost. Because when you destroy the infrastructure, it's very, very difficult to bring that back and the skilled workforce that it takes to deal with that. So very clearly this information, and if you can supply this to our committee, would be very, very helpful in our moving forward. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, General Leader. Mr. Womack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You thread a very difficult needle in that, and there's been a lot of comments made, and I associate myself with a lot of these comments on the fact that here we are trying to figure out a base budget at the same time of a supplemental and at the same time talking about reconciliation in order to be able to meet the needs of the joint force going forward. And my friend, the ranking member of the full committee, talks about capability gaps. When you have to do it this way because of the lack of certainty and the political dynamics around this dais and, of course, throughout Congress, there are going to be gaps in capability. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary?
I mean, we do everything we can to try to minimize that by planning what could play off against something else, but inevitably there are places where we have to make adjustments. You're right, sir.
I want to get somewhat parochial here for just a minute on the subject of our reserve component, and this question would be for General Cain. Last month, 22 adjutants general, all of those who command fighter units in their state, signed a letter to Congress calling for multi-year procurement authority to buy between 72 and 100 new fighters annually. 13 of 24 fighter units lack recapitalization plans. On the Army side, all of our states suffer from a lack of reimbursement for responding to the call of their communities. Between fiscal 20 and fiscal 24, over $71 million was paid by states to the Guard, but the Guard never saw that reimbursement. As you may know, any non-federal entity reimbursing a federal entity causes the funding to go to the Treasury, and NGB never sees that reimbursement. Our Guard is paying to respond to a disaster out of O&M funds, then having to pay more to maintain it. As the primary combat reserve for our active force, the Guard continues to play an outsized role in the nation's defense. In fact, General Nordhaus recently said that our National Guardsmen are fully integrated as part of the joint force in Operation Epic Fury. So here's my point. The Guard and Reserve are being asked to do more. Epic Fury, Midnight Hammer, border security missions, domestic deployments, and the many all-hazard responses across the 54. They are as much in the fight as the regular component. So, what is the department's plan to ensure that the Guard and Reserve are recapitalized, maintained, and reimbursed at a pace consistent with their operational role in the national defense strategy?
Sir, I'm assuming that question's coming to me since you're looking at me.
You would be correct.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. You know, as a member of the Guard, a proud member of the Guard, I'm mindful that every day when you mobilize the Guard, you mobilize the United States people. And they are now much more than a tactical reserve. They're a strategic reserve. The decisions on recapping the fighter community live obviously within our civilian leadership, but the requirements that they're out there getting after every day, as you alluded to, sir, are substantive and long-lasting beyond just the Title 32 force. What I'm always inspired by is the professionalism of the Guard and the reserves, who get more out of an airplane than one might think. I mean, I go out there to Andrews often and still get to fly, and my crew chiefs are master sergeants and senior master sergeants who've been on a particular airplane for a long, long time. So they'll continue to force extend that capability due to the professionalism that they have. It doesn't mean we don't have to take a hard look at recap and make sure that the fourth generation airplanes are on a pathway to fifth and sixth gen as the department continues to look at what we're solving for.
Mr. Chairman, if we have another round of questions, I'll come back with another because my next question is probably not going to yield me enough time, and I'll yield back the balance.
Mr. Cuellar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, Mr. Secretary, all of y'all. Thank you and all the men and women, thank you for your service. I want to ask you about the Western Hemisphere. I want to talk to you about Mexico and then the border. First of all, thank you for the work that y'all are doing in the Western Hemisphere. I've always said that we're looking at other parts of the world. We have to look at our own backyard, and we got to make sure that the Western Hemisphere is working with us. So thank you for that. Anything y'all want to add to the work that y'all doing there, I would ask you to talk to us a little bit about it. Mexico's the other one, very important part of us. Congressman Michael McCall and myself were down there. We pushed for the Special Operation Forces, SEAL, to do training exercises. And for the first time, we actually have military forces in Mexico, which is very unique. And again, congratulations on that. If you can tell us what they're doing, and we need to see more of that. We also have, talking about the Guard also, we have I believe the California Guard is now for the first time a partnership with Mexico. We've been pushing, I've been pushing Texas, but California got there before we did, but that's good. And talk a little bit about that. Also on the border, I want to thank you and the men and women of Joint Task Force Southern Border for the work that they're doing on the homeland. They're in my area, Laredo and other places. But I want to draw your attention to one particular threat, that is the accelerating demands. The cartels are not only watching what's happening in Ukraine, but they're learning from it. And we're hearing from credible reports about cartels looking at fiber optic drone systems. And we all know what that is. And my question is, what is the department doing to get ahead of this threat? How are you investing in the counter-UAS capabilities to defeat fiber optics drone systems? And what lessons are we learning from what's happening? You know, the procurement, the bureaucrats, without due respect, it takes a long time to get our systems. Over there, the cartels, they got the money. They don't have to go through a procurement system. They'll just buy the drones, and they're out manning us on the Mexican side along the border. So thank you, and if you can address that, or the chairman also.
Well, thank you, Congressman. I very much appreciate your efforts in this realm for a very long time. And I think you see in the national security strategy, the national defense strategy, Western Hem and Homeland is priority number one. We may pace to the ability on the first island chain, but priority number one is here. And you've seen it through America's Counter Cartel Coalition and getting after the designated terrorist organizations that are trafficking drugs and humans into the United States, something you've been talking a lot about. And that's the beginning of our defense in depth. It starts down there where they produce and where they move And then into Mexico, where we have had an unprecedented amount of partnership, and we appreciate that. We would encourage Defensa and Marina to continue where they can to partner and do more. That's the expectation of the United States government, of the Mexican government, is step up so that we don't have to. And then sealing that southwest border is the defense of the American people. It's the defense of the homeland. And when you talk to the troops that are down there doing that, they're proud of it. We also have multiple national defense areas there, which are controlled by DOW, where we can do rapid testing on counter UAS, JIATA 401 capabilities. So we're using those places to streamline the process by which we see what the cartels are trying to do and get after it with new capabilities that we can then field elsewhere, also learning from Ukraine in the process. I would defer to the chairman.
Sir, I'll just add a few things onto this. It's the Russia-Ukraine lessons learned and the application of those lessons by other actors like cartels is one we're focused a lot on. It's going to require a whole of government effort. As the Secretary mentioned, we do have Joint Interagency Task Force 401, led by an incredible Army one-star Brigadier General Matt Ross, who's focused solely in a chairman's controlled activity. So 401 reports up to me and in turn then to the Secretary to make sure that we're entrepreneurially looking at how to sense, see, detect, and defeat the range of small UAS threats. General Ross was just out in CENTCOM looking at some of the challenges that they're having over there. It'll continue to be an area of significant focus for the Joint Force, sir.
Well, my time is up, but I want to ask you to continue working with Mexico. You do have unprecedented partnerships, but the more we can push them, they're allies. There's a historical sensitivity, we know why, but the more you can push them to get them to work with us, that would be great. Thank you so much for all of y'all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, General Cain, Mr. Hurst, thank you for being here, and thank you, more importantly, for your service to the country. The 2026 National Defense Strategy makes clear that China is the pacing challenge, and this budget request puts real resources behind that nomenclature, including $11.7 billion for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. My concern is that we're not just competing against China's military capability. We're competing against the speed at which China can build, replace, and influence. Where are some capability gaps when it comes to a potential conflict with the PRC? And General Cain, how will your priorities posture the joint force to close those gaps?
Chairman, thanks for the question. The speed at their production capability is one of the reasons why I'm grateful for the full team's partnership on speeding up the U.S. defense industrial base efforts, as well as the national industrial base efforts. And I'd really like to thank those mom and pop machine shops and second, third, fourth tier suppliers that live in all of your districts who are also increasing speed and capability without losing quality across the entirety of our manufacturing system. And it's going to require all of that. And when we look at the range of capabilities that we must have to be properly armed and globally integrated, that extends to things like, long-range fires and really an ability to arm our joint force to win from the seabed to cislunar space in every single domain in there. And I'll defer to the comptroller and to the secretary to talk about the particular elements, but the goal is the range and mix of capabilities that creates outsized dilemmas for Xi Jinping and others that are out there to ensure that we maintain and sustain deterrence. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. Second, the war between the U.S. and Iran reinforces an old lesson, which is that modern conflict comes down to attrition. China has been able to produce naval ships at a pace our industrial base can't match. The ships are not as large as ours, but quantity has a quality of its own. How are we postured for an economy of force in the Pacific, particularly if Taiwan is invaded?
Well, sir, channeling my inner Clausewitz, which is always something I try to remember, the big moving parts of warfighting. You know, we're not really doing economy of force work in the Pacific. As you alluded to, sir, and others have, it's our primary focus. And so on a daily basis, we come to the Secretary with a range of military options across the world so that he and the President can carefully consider those military actions and associated risks. It all comes back to the budgetary tools that you'll hopefully give us and the authorities to achieve those capabilities. And as we look, for example, at shipbuilding, which you talked about, I'm grateful for the work that the Navy is doing to scale that effort to ensure that we offer and continue to offer those range of options to our civilian leaders here in the United States.
Quickly to Epic Fury. Our fight with Iran has confirmed what defense planners had long warned about. Iran doesn't need a peer military to cause serious problems. Its playbook to cheap drones built from commercial parts, sea mines in contested straits, fast attack craft, and anti-ship missiles. The war also confirmed a harder lesson. Even with overwhelming firepower, the side that runs out of munitions or air defenses first loses. Are we, Mr. Secretary, are we secure in that point?
Absolutely. And we are winning, have won every component of what we fought in this conflict. Iran knows that based on the incredible degradation of their capabilities, and which is why we saw them wanting to come to the table. How this gets resolved will be on our terms, on President Trump's terms, and we have all the munitions and capabilities necessary to enable that.
Thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.